Ross Tucker, filling in for Dan, obviously. I feel like I do this every Monday after the draft. Joined now by Mike Renner, who does an unbelievable job for Pro Football Focus. A lot to get to as it relates to the draft. Although, Mike, I got to start, which is always great, by the way, for the people listening on Fox Sports Radio. I got to start with Mike's sweatshirt because I'm looking at Mike's sweatshirt. This is a key question. Were you painting over the weekend? Is that real paint? Or is that are you just fashionable and that's the thing now is you wear a sweatshirt that makes it look like you were painting?
It was purchased with said paint already on. I am not a handyman by any means. So it was a fashion statement on my end.
So that's like the style. Mike, how old are you?
Yes, I am 32 years old. I just turned 32.
Okay. Because I feel like if that's the style, then man, I am out of style. That's amazing. So you went to the store and you're like, I could get the fake paint sweatshirt or the non-painted sweatshirt, and you went with the fake paint sweatshirt.
Correct. It's gotten a lot of love, actually. It's a very polarizing piece, but it's very comfortable. It's one of my faves.
Should we be asking Mike for his opinion on anything else for the rest of this segment? Yes, Seton.
I just feel the need. I like his sweatshirt. I think it looks good.
It looks awesome.
It's polarizing.
It looks like, it looks like my buddy in college who was a roofer. And everything he wore had paint on it and stuff. You look like a man's man, Mike. You don't look like a guy that sits in an office and evaluates tape all day.
Well, that's what I'm going for. I want to surprise people with that.
All right. So a lot to get into here. Let's start with draft grades. Because I was saying earlier, not a big fan of the people that say, you can't do draft grades for 3 years, dude. How do you look at it? Is it just the players they got? Is it the strategy? Is it, how well they did with what they had to work with? How do you guys evaluate over a Pro Football Focus?
Yes, it's what you had to work with, because we actually you go back and look at draft grades, and the teams that had 2 first-round picks, no one gets lower than a B+ in those. It's oh yeah, they got a bunch of really good players. Of course they were going to. They had 2 first-round picks. So for us, we gave the Giants a lower grade than probably, I think we gave them the lowest grade of anyone, because 5 and 7 were always going to be good players. 5 and 7 were no-brainer picks. So you can't give them credit for that. They had picks 5 and 7 because they sucked last year. So to me, the draft grade has to be the decisions that went into the picks. So if you didn't have a top 100 pick, you could still get an A if they were good decisions that you made. So that's how we do our draft grades at PFF.
It's such a great point because I have not seen the Jets get anything other than A+ anywhere. They had 3 first-round picks and 4 of the first 36. If they didn't get and they got name guys that were ranked number 1 at their position or whatever, if they didn't get good players, then they should fail.
Yeah, exactly. And that's too much draft analysis. You got to actually dig into these picks.
Okay, so then I was saying this earlier. We just mentioned the Tyrann Mathieu news with the New Orleans Saints. Looks like he's going to sign there. But in terms of what they had to work with, do you take into account how much the Saints gave up to get Chris Olave? The trade with the Eagles, then the trade with the Commanders. It's 5 or 6 picks for Chris Olave, Mike.
Yes, we definitely took that. That's why we gave him a C+, which is probably one of the lower people out there giving grades. But it was this year's first-round pick, 2 third-round picks this year, a 4th-round pick, next year's first-round pick, and a 2024 second-round pick. That is what it cost you for one Chris Olave. And that's not even I love Chris Olave. I think he's going to be a great player and it's perfect for that offense. But there have been safe, quote-unquote, safe picks who have not worked out in the NFL. So to be give up that much for one guy is, to me, you can't give that a good grade because of so many opportunity costs missed.
Is there a team that we're not talking about that you really liked or really didn't like? It seems like everybody's talking about the same teams. Give me someone that you guys really liked or really didn't like that maybe isn't getting as much attention.
That's a good. I really like the Cowboys draft. I don't think a lot of people have really loved it. Jerry Jones had to go out and show his draft board to justify their first round pick. But I think they got 3 starters at 3 very valuable positions at tackle, edge rusher, and wide receiver with their first 3 pick. And then they had one of the best day 3s of anyone. I think their 5th round picks all have a role on this roster. And Damon Clark in the 5th round, he's obviously not going to play as a rookie with the neck fusion surgery, but if he doesn't have that, if you can just, throw that first year out the season, which you do for a lot of rookies anyways, he's a top, 70 player in this class at the linebacker position that they got at 176. So I think the Cowboys had a very underratedly good draft this year.
Talking with Mike Renner, he's the lead draft analyst for Pro Football Focus and co-host of Tailgate, which sounds amazing. Sounds like a show I should be on. Speaking of beer and food, let's get into some of these quarterbacks because I'm really curious, Mike. How much work you do work in the offseason, right? Like you evaluate the kids coming into the year. A lot of people I really respect had a first-round grade on Sam Howell coming into the year. He went in the 5th round, Mike. Wasn't injured. How does that happen? How do you guys, and maybe you're going to tell me you didn't, but how do you watch the video of him in freshman and sophomore year, say he's a first-round pick, he plays a whole season, and then he's a 5th-round pick? How does that happen?
Because he didn't fall there because of his tape. Now, the tape wasn't good this year, but even still, it was not 5th-round tape. He fell there because of his interviews. From all that I've heard, was not good on a whiteboard, was not good with protections, blitz recognition, those sort of things just did not impress anyone. And I think a lot of these quarterbacks fell just because there weren't a lot of landing spots. There weren't many teams really. If you're drafting a guy with a top 50 pick, you're putting him in that starter conversation, or at least to challenge your starter. And no one was really willing to do that. And so when you have a guy who's as far behind the learning curve as Sam Howell was reportedly, from what I've heard, I just think teams were willing to go elsewhere, even though that the sophomore tape was great. Like it was 1st-round tape. And that was, none of these other guys are putting up near what he did as a true sophomore at North Carolina. So I still was a fan of his. I would have taken him before, any of those guys, a lot of those guys that went in the 3rd round, to where I think the Washington Commanders, where they got him, have to be really, really happy.
That's really interesting, Mike. I had not heard that about Sam Howell in the interview process. I did see some reports of some concerns about erratic behavior from Matt Corral. I think Ian Rappaport said that during the draft. What about Malik Willis? I mean, these are the times where I almost feel like, Mike, we're being lied to. I mean, so many people said, oh, the talent, the upside, top 10 pick, top 20 pick. Then he doesn't go till the 3rd round. Was that a team meeting thing as well, or were we lied to? Like, how does that happen?
That one is the one I can't explain. I think he is talented. Like there's no doubt about it. You flip on his tape for five plays, and you'll see a cannon of an arm. You'll see elite rushing ability. He's probably the 2nd best runner at the quarterback position in the NFL right now. And the biggest thing with him, though, is the learning curve. It is just literally the offense he played in is not going to have anything to do with the offense he plays in at the NFL. Just nothing similar whatsoever there at Liberty. So the learning curve. So if you're taking him high, you're probably waiting 2 to 3 years for him to even see the football field. And then the offense he's going to have to run. So it's not like Jalen Hurts in that manner, who, is going to be able to hit the field quickly despite maybe having limited physical tools, who's also, a runner at the position. But then once he does hit the league, once he does start, the offense he's going to run is going to look like maybe a couple of offenses around the NFL. It's going to look like what the Ravens do with Lamar Jackson. Because if you're not taking advantage of that, you're doing it wrong. He can't just come in and say say even the Titans where he went and do the exact same thing you're going to do with Ryan Tannehill. It's going to have to be unique to him. And not a lot of teams are willing to do that for a backup, have a special package of plays, have a special offense just for their backup to come in. So I think that was the biggest, if I'm going to pinpoint any reason he fell, it would be that.
Mike, last one. What about the 2023 draft? Because I saw where you just dropped your mock draft, which, by the way, some people get real upset about. I love it.
Oh, yeah.
I think it's amazing. Some people are like, you can't do that. It's way too early. It ruins kids' dreams. It ruins everything. Like, again, another person I don't want to invite to my beer pong tournament ever is that person. But you just released your 2023 mock draft, which is obviously very early. Who stands out to you? What stands out to you about the draft in general? And then what quarterbacks are you pretty confident will go in round 1?
Yeah, I hate the people that think I'm hyping these guys up too much by putting them in the first round. As if like all these guys haven't had their ego stroked, haven't been 5-star recruits with their ego strokes if they're like 16 years old. I think they've had enough by now that one more mock draft isn't going to push them over the edge. But I will say the quarterback class is better next year. And I think that played a factor in a lot of these runs, whether it was the Seahawks passing on quarterback, whether it was the Falcons waiting till the third round, the Lions, like some of these teams that everyone thought would be in the mix. I think next year is going to be the year they go up and get their quarterbacks because, with multiple first rounders, some of those teams have the firepower to go up and get one. So it's a good quarterback class. And I really like this defensive tackle class. After some weak DT classes the last 2 years, we got some studs coming in 2023. Jalen Carter from Georgia, highest pass rushing grade of any Georgia defender last year was Jalen Carter. Loaded line that just saw, 3 guys go drafted first round from that defensive line. Best ones still at Georgia right now. And a guy named Jacqueline Roy at LSU, defensive tackle. Like there is some defensive tackle talent that is much needed in the NFL today.
Check him out. Pro Football Focus lead draft analyst, co-host of Tailgate, Mike Renner. Mike, thanks so much for the time.
For sure. Thanks for having me, Ross.
That was a groundbreaking interview discussing whether or not you should buy a sweatshirt that already has paint stains on it